Hey guys, and welcome in to the Horseshoe Huddle on Sports Illustrated podcast. We are the Horseshoe Guys. I am Josh Carney, deputy editor of SI Colts. That is Jake Arthur, our senior analyst. We are back in your lives for the first time. And how long has it been, Jake? A month? It feels like it's been a month.
It's been a hot minute.
Yeah. Feels like we missed a lot. But in case the readers don't know, we do have two newborns. One each among us, so our hands are certainly full. So that is what's kept us away here. But we are going to just dive into it here. We are in the thick of the offseason with the Colts. They just wrapped up minicamp last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? My time is just non-existent.
Got it. Yeah, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I believe. Of course, their first week, I was out of town, and then I made it onto the facility the next week. But yeah, I think it was like 2-3 weeks ago.
So let's talk about what you saw in person when you were there. Kind of what were your observations? I know obviously it's football in shorts. We need to clarify that with people right off the bat. Like nothing serious is happening. But what was your takeaway from your time at minicamp there, Jake?
Yeah, just they always kind of have some of the lower level roster guys and some of the younger inexperienced guys off to one practice field, and then kind of the vets and the ones and twos on one field. There were some guys getting some good work in. I thought it was notable that Mike Strachan, for example, the rookie receiver out of Charleston, tiny school guy, rookie, he was mixing it up with the guys who would traditionally be the ones and twos. Now that's not a depth chart indication right now by any means. There's not a whole lot we can take from that. But what it does tell me is that they're already kind of throwing him into the mix. And, Chris Ballard said the guy is not as raw as we think, being from whatever Charleston is, like Division II, Division III. He's not that raw. Mm-hmm. They're throwing a lot at him. They're wanting to see what he's got. And, we saw Carson Wentz and him hook up a couple times, especially down in the red zone. I thought that was notable. I think we saw Will Holden out there at left tackle for a bit. So quietly, Will Holden probably holds a little more prestige in the coaching staff's eyes than people realize. I don't think that's like an indicator that he'll be over Sam Tevy until Eric Fisher gets there. But there was just some lineup things I noticed, just interesting things they decided to do during the spring right now just to kind of get some reps in. But no, just, it was obvious that it wasn't the first time Carson Wentz had thrown to some of these guys. You could see that they've already got some work in off the field and away from the facility. So that's good that Wentz has kind of orchestrated all that so that they can kind of hit the ground running while they're with each other in the facility.
Yeah. Some of the reports coming out of OTAs at this point, Carson Wentz looks great. I mean, obviously it goes back to he's put in some of that work this offseason so far with guys like T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, Desmond Patman. So he was able to hit the ground running. Today, Mike Wells from ESPN NFL Nation, the Colts reporter, mentioned that Wentz was a surprise standout at minicamp. Jake, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, Wentz has fit into the locker room well. He's getting to know guys quickly, but he's also performing on the field and kind of making some eye-popping throws. Nyheim Hines mentioned he has a great deep ball. We've heard that from T.Y. Hilton this offseason. Where are you at with Carson Wentz, and are you surprised that he's fitting in this quickly and off to such a fast start in the offseason with the Colts?
Yeah, I don't know how good it is when you consider the quarterback to be a surprise standout in OTAs. But no, he looked all right. It's good to see a quarterback not afraid to uncork the deep ball again. Jacoby Brissett, the deep ball was very, very rare. And it wasn't too common with Phillip Rivers either. Rivers had a more aggressive mindset than Brissett. It was just a matter of arm strength. It's not that he didn't want to. It's that he had to kind of pick his places to do it. With Wentz, he's got the arm strength and he's still got a young arm. So it's good to see that ball go downfield at a more consistent pace. I think it's going to remind some people that the Colts do have the guys to do it. I know we've talked about in the offseason, we thought they would get kind of a burner or a speed guy. I do think it's going to emphasize T.Y. Hilton a little more. I know Paris Campbell is kind of their slot guy, and they do a lot with him just after the catch, closer to the line of scrimmage. But I would expect to see some downfield stuff with him just because he's a 4-3 guy. Why would you not do it, I don't know. I just think with the cast the Colts have, if some of these guys stay healthy, it'll fit Wentz's style pretty well. I think about Kylan Granson and Mo Ali Cox going up the seam at tight end a little bit too. It's I'm not super surprised that he did well. He looked crisp. There's some things here or there where the ball may be a little late or behind a guy, but you're seeing the ball go down the field on like wheel routes to running backs, which is exciting. You don't see that from the Colts a whole lot. You see movement from the quarterback. You see the ball going downfield. It's exciting to see. I think it opens things up for the Colts offense in general.
Yeah, and, as I mentioned earlier, this is football in shorts. Obviously, they're working against the air for the most part. But I will say this. It's good to hear Wentz looks good now rather than, Wentz was really struggling. His arm looks poor. His accuracy is off, because then that would be a huge red flag. This should be some of the easiest throws he'll make all season, obviously, against air.
Yeah.
But I like that he's getting praise off the field for how he's interacting in the locker room, because we heard reports coming out of Philadelphia towards the end that he was very, disconnected from teammates. And, he was the last one in, first one out there once he was on the bench. So now, he's looking at this as another chance, a second chance at life in the NFL. And I think he's running with it. And that's all you can ask for at this point. You don't expect him to come in and be a rah-rah leader and, take over that locker room, but you want him to fit in, and to hear guys like T.Y. Hilton and Nyheim Hines and Zach Pascal say just how well he's doing fitting into that locker room, that's huge. But obviously, Jay, he's going to have to prove it, preseason, training camp, regular season. That's all that's going to matter. But right now, this is all we get. So it's good to hear that he's doing well and he looks good. And he looks rejuvenated. That's the number one thing for me, is that he looks happy in all the photos and videos that I've seen, because that was not the Carson Wentz we saw in 2020 in Philadelphia. Other than that, I mean, another guy that's gaining praise from OTAs, and I just wrote up a story this afternoon on it, is Kwity Paye. He has hit the ground running from, everything we've heard at this point. Matt Eberflus mentioned that he's just picking things up quickly and knows how to answer questions that are thrown at him. Should we temper our expectations with Kwity Paye at this point, or is it a great sign that he has grasped the playbook this quickly and understands what the Colts defense wants to do?
I think a little bit of both. For me, it's not often that I think rookie edge defenders are going to get thrown in right away and be starters. And there's a lot to happen in between now and week 1 of the regular season. But by all indications, it looks like that starting right end spot is Paye's to lose. I think they're going to give him every opportunity to earn that. And in this style of defense, how they want their defensive line to play, and considering kind of some of his strengths and weaknesses right now, I think it's a perfect scenario for him. From the right end position, there's not going to be a ton of reading and reacting and diagnosing. That's their primary pass rushing spot. So they just are going to say, dude, go get in the backfield, by whatever means necessary, work on some of your moves and counter moves, but get into the backfield. And that's kind of his game, high energy, kind of there's some chaos to his game, but in a good way. I see some, how Ed Oliver was real raw, but he was like the Tasmanian devil coming out a couple years ago from, I think, Houston. Yes. You kind of see that with Paye a little bit. Once he kind of forms a plan of attack, you're going to see a lot of those things come together and really be a feared guy off the edge. Expectation-wise, I expect playing time, but I'll give him kind of slow progress, because I feel like all the way back when Dwight Freeney was a rookie, I don't feel like he was an immediate splash. I feel like it took him a little time, and then things picked up, like midway through his rookie year or so. So, the sky is the limit, but he's a rookie. He deserves some patience. Now, if he's moving at a snail's pace like we saw with like Ben Banigou in year 2 or Tyquan Lewis in year 2, that'll be an issue.
Right.
But all we need to see is consistent presence and effort, and I think we'll all be encouraged by seeing that. I've kind of been thinking by the end of the year, his sack numbers will probably be around 7 or 8. I don't think, I'm not going to set the bar at double-digit sacks from right away, but I think a handful is fair.
Yeah, going back to that Ed Oliver comparison, it's kind of like a bull in a china shop. He's so good moving downhill, but he doesn't have that ability to temper himself in a sense that everything moves so quickly downhill for him. He'll run into a play, but he hasn't flashed that ability to really settle down once he's in the backfield, read and react. I think between 7 and 9 sacks is what he should be able to get this year, with the playing time that he's looking at. But I'm really impressed that he's come in. He's picked up the playbook so quickly, according to coaches and teammates. He understands everything that's going on. And that's huge, especially in OTAs and in minicamp, for him to be able to do that, because once training camp comes, he can just put the pads on and really just go out and play once he has that foundation of understanding. The one question I had for you, Jake, overall with this defense, I know they lost some pieces. Justin Houston's not back. We know that. Anthony Walker left in free agency. Malik Hooker's no longer on this team, even though he wasn't part of much last year. But do you think this defense can take a step forward this year, despite some of the free agents they lost and some of the young guys that they're going to have playing significant roles now?
Yeah, when you look at the losses of guys like Justin Houston, Anthony Walker specifically, it's going to be a lot younger guys stepping into those roles. So I think the athleticism moves up times 10. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of thinking of, maybe whether it's missed assignments or just not seeing certain things that may come up a little more often, especially with Justin Houston, a guy who's seen everything. If it's Kwity Paye in that spot, and then, Kemoko Toure is up next to bat after him, that's 2 younger guys without much NFL experience. Paye none so far, and Toure's been hurt, most of the last 2 years. So you're going to lose a little bit in the cerebral part of it. Anthony Walker, not a smarter linebacker in the NFL, arguably. Not that Okereke isn't smart. He is. I think he's got some instincts, but that was Walker's calling card. It's what it was coming out of Northwestern, is that he played like a coach's son. And then this offseason, Chris Ballard said, if he wants to go in the front office after he's retired, he'll be a GM. If he wants to get into coaching, he'll be a head coach. Guys love him, and they love him mentally. So there will be a drop-off there. But one big way for those attributes to go up is playing time. So by there will be some growing pains for this defense early in the season, but I think by the second half of the season, things should smooth out a little bit.
That's kind of where I was leaning. Like, yes, the opportunity is there for this defense to take a jump forward in 2021, but I think the first month and a half of the season, you're going to see some growing pains. You're going to see some, missed assignments that are going to lead to some splash plays for opponents. That's certainly going to be frustrating to watch, but you have to let players develop. You have to throw them into the fire. They can't gain those reps, behind a computer screen just watching film. They have to make those mistakes out on the field and correct them. So that's what I would say to Colts fans, is just kind of temper your expectations first month or so. Like, obviously, the ability for this defense to be a top 10 unit once again, maybe top 5, is there on paper. But I think the first month and a half, you're going to see some growing pains. And that's typical with young defenses, but future certainly looks bright. Jake, I wanted to transition to fantasy football. You've done that occasionally here in this offseason. That'll certainly ramp up. 2 Colts were just listed as potential breakouts this year. You want to tell us a little bit more about that and where you're kind of at when it comes to fantasy land and the Colts' outlook offensively?
Yeah, so this grouping is kind of three-layered here. There's something I wrote up last week, I think, where they expected Carson Wentz and Paris Campbell to be late risers up draft boards, kind of once fans see what's going on in training camp. And then also today, I wrote about Michael Pittman Jr. being considered the Colts breakout fantasy star of 2021. So between the three of those guys, Wentz, obviously, his stock's never been lower. People are really down on him, but any sort of positive buzz going through training camp, that's going to boost his stock. I think by the time of that article, he was average of like QB 28. He's never finished that poorly in his career, even last year, when he had the worst year of his career by most standards. So he's had top 10 QB finishes twice in his career. I think last year he honestly was middle of the road fantasy wise by the time he was benched in week 13. So when I put out my rankings, I'll probably have him in the top half of the league, I'm sure, before the season. Campbell and Pittman as well. I really like them. I don't know where they fall in the pecking order. I know in this offense, the ball gets spread around quite a bit, and I think they're going to be run centric because you have Jonathan Taylor. Why would you not? But, I think T.Y. Hilton for now is still going to be at the top of that pecking order. Every time we think someone else is going to start taking the mantle, Hilton always averages out above them. So for now, T.Y. is still the guy. We've seen Campbell be an enormous part of the offense when he's healthy. Like, they try to force feed him looks. You can tell they want to have him involved. Pittman, obviously, going into year two, there's expectations of progression. I think the ball's going to be spread around a lot. I expect yardage and touchdowns to go up for Pittman. And then, Campbell, you obviously got to try and trust the health. If I draft him, it's going to be, in the double-digit rounds for me just because, he'll probably be available there, number one. And number two, the health. We have to see a healthy Campbell before we can trust that. But God, between the runs and what's that?
Do you think it's fair to label Paris Campbell a boom or bust prospect at this point? Obviously he's really only shown, I think he's played 9 games in 2 years.
Yeah, 9 games in 2 years.
Yeah, so you're kind of getting that boom or bust. Is it fair to say that from a fantasy football perspective?
Yeah, because I think if he stays healthy, he would be a boom. Like, I think kind of the best things you've seen from a guy like Curtis Samuel, that's comparable for Paris Campbell. Considering what he's done in his career to this point, you could probably consider that a boom. That's not like wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 numbers, but for him, it'd be outstanding. And then, of course, we've seen him bust these 2 years being hurt. I don't want to consider him as a player a bust yet because, these injuries have been things that have required procedures. And he was a healthy guy at Ohio State. It's just like he's been snake bitten since coming to the NFL. But no, he is one of the bigger boom or bust fantasy prospects this year for sure.
Yeah. Couple more pieces of news here I wanted to get to before we do a deep dive into the Colts offense. A lot of the talk right now is contract extensions. You've got 4 key guys coming up. You've got Darius Leonard in his contract year, Braden Smith in his contract year. Nyheim Hines is also in his contract year, and Quentin Nelson is looking at a 5th-year option in 2022, but is also in line for an extension. I think at least 2 of those 4 will be done before training camp, or at least week 1. But is there a scenario where you see Jim Irsay, Chris Ballard, and the Colts hand out contract extensions to all 4? Or do they wait on someone like, Quentin Nelson and play that 2022 season with him on the 5th-year option? Where are you kind of at with the extensions and who do you think gets done this summer?
I think Smith and Leonard probably get done first. Okay. Yeah, because Nelson, of course, has the 5th-year option, like you mentioned. And unfortunately for Nyheim Hines, I just think he kind of falls fourth in that priority list. just because he's a running back and he's not even the starter. I mean, they want him. There's no reason for them not to want him. But when you're looking at those guys, he kind of has to fall fourth in order there. Smith, that's your starting right tackle who you want there for the next 10 years. Leonard, you want him to be a Colt for life as well. So I think those will get hammered out. You don't want those looming into next year. Nelson, I think they'll get that done sometime, in the next year. That there's no big rush to it. I am interested to see if Hines gets done before Nelson, only because his contract expires first and it'll be cheaper. It's not going to be a market setting contract for Hines.
Right.
But also for Nelson, it probably makes a little sense to wait, because the longer they go, the higher his price is going to get. And then the salary cap goes up. So if I was Nelson's side of it, I'd probably wait a little bit. But if there's two guys who are getting done this summer, I would think it would be Nelson and Smith, or Leonard and Smith.
Right. Do you see any scenario where one of those four is not a Colt after their contract expires? Because personally, I don't. I think all four are.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Nyheim Hines is a key building block, because he's not the workhorse, but he is a key component to what Frank Reich wants to do offensively. So do you see a scenario at all where one of those four ends up leaving in free agency?
The only one I could see is Hines. Just again, I don't think running back is an enormous priority for them. I think they love everything Nyheim does. I think the selection of him in the draft, they would have done it 10 times out of 10. I think they love the fact that he did come around to being a good punt returner. Because before you started covering the Colts, everyone was looking at him as a return specialist, and a receiver and runner. His rookie year was awful as far as being a return man goes. Don't know if you noticed, don't know if you saw that, but yeah, there was kind of lost hope about him being a return specialist after his rookie year. He shook it off. They gave him another chance to do it in year 2. And he was awesome. He returned 2 punts for touchdowns against the Panthers. So he's the total package for them now. I don't think they would want to let him go. But if there's any of the four that would be going elsewhere, I think it would be him. I just don't think they want to let any of those other 3 out the door by any means.
See, I lean that maybe Braden Smith could go, just because they've already invested so much in the offensive line. And they're going to have to figure out left tackle at some point. If Eric Fisher is who they hope he is, he's going to get a hefty raise. You could be looking at 50, 60 million just in the offensive line. And I just don't know if that's the wisest thing from a team building perspective. But at the same time, we have to remember who the general manager is. Chris Ballard loves to build through the trenches. And if he's going to spend significant amounts of money at one position, it will be on offensive line. I can't see. I really can't see any of the four leaving. Darius Leonard's going to become the highest paid off-ball linebacker in NFL history. Quentin Nelson's going to reset the market for at least guards. He could potentially do it for offensive linemen in general, with the significant cap spike that should come with the new TV deal. Braden Smith, I would think 10 to 12 million a year, maybe more, but they want him around. Nyheim Hines, he reminds me of Darren Sproles. He's a guy that can get $4 to $5 million a year on a long-term deal and just stick around in one place for a long time. I mean, I think Darren Sproles split evenly between the then San Diego Chargers and then the Philadelphia Eagles. He just, similar skill sets. So speaking of contracts, PFF is at it again. They seem to be coming after Carson Wentz consistently. The other day, you wrote it up, I believe, Jake. PFF named Kenny Moore's contract the Colts' best contract and Carson Wentz's the worst. Now, keep in mind, the Colts did not sign Carson Wentz to that contract. But when you look at it, considering the cap will continue to rise compared to other franchise quarterbacks across the NFL, it's actually not that bad. Where are you at in terms of, do you agree or disagree with PFF? If you disagree, do you have a different contract in mind that could be the worst that the Colts currently have?
So the Colts, it takes a little work to find bad contracts there because they just don't do it. They front load deals. They don't give older guys tons of money. If they do, it's all front loaded. They just don't trap themselves in there. They've got an excellent cap guru and Mike Bloom in the front office. He does a great job. But yeah, I think two contracts you look at would be Wentz, just because it's the biggest, and Jack Doyle. A lot of people point out Jack Doyle is someone who makes probably a little more than he should at this point.
Right.
It doesn't bother me. It's whatever. He's reliable. He does everything you need. That I think it's like $5 million. That amount of money doesn't. It's whatever.
It's not like they're in cap hell, you know?
No, they never are. They always have among the most until these extensions come up. Right. But no, Wentz, obviously, you probably have to call it the worst just because it's the biggest and he's coming off his worst season. Right. But when the Eagles gave him that contract in the 2019 offseason, that was market value for him. That's what you had to do. You had a young quarterback who you wanted to be there forever. You give him that kind of money. And so maybe the structure of it is not great because now they're on the hook for all this dead money. But it's not super detrimental for the Colts. I don't think it's tough for them to get out of the deal with an enormous loss here in the next year or so. So for the Colts, it's not that bad of a contract. It's just expensive. So yeah, by default of being like the biggest contract and him coming off a bad season. But again, if he levels back out and gives them average to above average quarterback play, then you're back in business and it doesn't look so bad.
I'm trying to find what they said for the Detroit Lions, because if they did not list Jared Goff as the worst contract for the Lions,
it's got to be Goff.
Then something is very wrong because Wentz and Goff both signed their big deals right around the same time. So let's see here. No, Jared Goff was not the worst contract.
Really?
I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, but Vaitai, the offensive lineman, 5 years, $45 million. He was listed as the worst. But they do have here Jared Goff and his $30.5 million in remaining guarantees. Could have easily been the winner here as well. But considering Goff was traded effectively as a salary dump move, this reality was understood by all parties involved. Now, wait a minute. Couldn't the Wentz deal from the Eagles be considered a salary dump?
Well, yes and no, because they're still on the hook for a ton of his contract, though.
And I believe the Rams are still on the hook for a certain portion of
they might be
Goff's, but maybe not. Maybe they waited until I can't remember the exact details, but it's just interesting the way a large outlet like PFF looks at two very similar situations and says, well, this one's the worst, but this one doesn't count because it was effectively a salary cap and everyone knew what was happening.
Because the Lions had a top 10 draft pick and a lot of people thought they might take a quarterback with it, which would have made Goff a rental, a 1-year rental. And that's if the rookie didn't win the job. They ultimately didn't, but a lot of people thought that was a real possibility because who sees Goff in Detroit for 10 more years? I don't.
Maybe Brad Holmes, their GM, just because he drafted him in Los Angeles, but who knows? It's just interesting. It just feels like it's a continuous dumping on Wentz.
And it will be until they see him playing good ball again. I mean, Phillip Rivers probably, that was a lot of turnovers. A lot of people said it about Phillip Rivers in his 2019 season with the Chargers, but it was harder to defend because he was like 37 at the time. And it's like, he could be toast. We don't know, but he wasn't. He still gave the Colts really good football.
Yes, he did.
Until people see Carson Wentz playing good football, we're going to keep hearing that. And the unfortunate part of it is there's a lot of bad football that gets played early in NFL seasons. Right. So until he smooths everything out, that's all we're going to hear.
And that leads me to my final question before we kind of do a deep dive into the offense. Do you think Wentz will see a significant amount of snaps in preseason, or do you think it's, obviously there's one less preseason game for the Colts this year for almost everyone across the NFL. Do you think we'll see an increase in snaps compared to, maybe 2019 when there was the preseason, or do you think it's going to be status quo for teams, just get through preseason healthy, and then we'll work people in slowly as the games actually count?
The under Frank Reich, the Colts have not put a lot of snaps in the preseason for important guys who they don't need to see him in the preseason because he's their starter regardless. Mm-hmm. If he throws 5 pick sixes in the preseason, he's their starter.
Right.
So they don't need to see him. So he'll play a little bit, but I don't think he'll play very much at all. Like Andrew Luck, for example, when he came back in 2018, everyone wanted to see him play a bunch, but I don't think he played very much at all in the preseason.
Right.
So that's kind of what I expect for Wentz. They just guys who they don't need to see, they don't play him very much. There will be some young starters who see snaps, like Pay will play a bit, and Okereke will probably play a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't think Wentz is going to play too much in the preseason, especially since it's 3 games. I think around the NFL, it'll probably be, week 1 is a drive for guys, and then week 2 is maybe a quarter, and then week 3 no one plays.
Nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So get set for a heavy dose of Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger.
That's what we want to see anyways. And I don't need to see Carson Wentz. He's going to be the starter again. He's going to start regardless of what he does in the preseason. Yeah. We need to see this Eason versus Ehlinger battle. That's what we need.
Yeah, we'll see plenty of Carson Wentz in September when the games actually count. But it comes down to, and we'll just dive right into our offensive breakdown. We'll start at quarterback. We've talked enough about Wentz. I think you and I are on the same page where we think he's going to be just fine. We don't think he's going to return to kind of that overhyped, misunderstood 2017 MVP caliber season, possibly 2018, 2019 level, which is fine. But the focus should be on the backup quarterback battle. And I'm calling it a battle because I genuinely believe Sam Ehlinger can push Jacob Eason. Where are you at with the backup quarterback situation? And what are you most looking forward to seeing in preseason, aside from just seeing those two taking snaps?
Yeah, this is one I think is real interesting. I mean, gun to my head, I think they carry those 3 on the roster. I don't want to completely leave out Jalen Morton, but I think we all know it's those two battling to back up Wentz. So the Colts seem to love Ehlinger, and they've glowed about him more than they've ever glowed about Eason. Mm-hmm. I think Eason is a better prospect. He's got a higher ceiling, that arm talent and everything. I think he's got more to work on he's got more to work on in order for him to see snaps in an NFL game. I don't know, man. That's why I think they'll carry all 3 this year. Yeah. Unless one of them is awful.
Did you have both of them in your 53-man prediction?
Yeah. Yep. So something I've said with Zach on when we did the Believe podcast was I think they'll carry all 3. I think Eason has the highest upside, and he could very well be the long-term backup.
Yeah.
But if Wentz got hurt for a week or something and they needed to start one of those 2 in a pinch, I think they'd have an easier time getting Ehlinger ready.
Yep,
he's way more experienced, and since he's got the mobility, they could work in so much more runs and options with him. Yep. I think they could survive a week better with Ehlinger than they could Eason. But Eason he's got the higher ceiling. But I don't know how long that they're going to have the patience for that, I think they probably know that too. That Eason is probably has got the higher upside, but that Ehlinger is probably the more realistic backup option. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing both of them just kind of compete. I hope that Frank Reich gives Ehlinger a chance to compete with the ones in preseason games, the starting unit that's going to go out there. I'd hate to see Eason get all the snaps with that first unit and then, say, hey, Sam, you need to just kind of prove yourself with the backups and the guys that are going to be on the streets here, in a few weeks. But I'm right in lockstep with you. I think both are going to make the 53-man roster. I kind of got some pushback when I put that out initially saying, why would the Colts be afraid of losing Sam Ehlinger? He was a 6th-round draft pick. Who's going to take him on the waiver wire? It's the most important position in football. Teams are going to take a shot no matter what, especially if he looks pretty decent in training camp. But I want to see Eason kind of work on his accuracy. I want to see him be accurate down the field. We know he has a huge arm. He can cut it loose from anywhere, but I want to see him be able to show some accuracy and some touch. And I want to see Ehlinger kind of push the ball down the field a little bit more. Texas didn't ask him to do that very often, and I think that was more due to some lack of arm strength. But I want to see him take more chances, and I really hope that they have some sort of design ready for him where it's almost like a wildcat, but RPOs, read options, let him use his legs because that's what he was really good at in college. And I trust that they will, but that's going to be one heck of a battle, just for backup quarterback. And the one question I have for you, Jake, do you think that they potentially pursue a veteran on cut down day just in case, or is it these three no matter what?
I don't want to say no matter what, but this whole offseason, I have assumed they would look for a veteran option. Now, I thought they would have done it already by now. I didn't think sitting here in almost July that the three guys behind Wentz would have 0 snaps in the NFL. I think that's real risky considering the guys played 16 games twice in 5 years. That's again, they're never going to force any position. I think if the right guy becomes available, yes. But I mean, right now I can't predict who's going to get cut. So right now it looks like it's these three. And again, I don't want to discount Jalen Morton. I'm kind of hoping he is awesome in the preseason and becomes this. We kind of have a tradition in Colts land of there's always a lower level quarterback who makes so much noise, and they're always like the 3rd string quarterback, and fans love them. And then
then they get cut and they're up in arms. Yep. Kind of like a cult hero where it's like, this guy's amazing. Look at what he's doing. There's no way we can cut him. And then he gets cut.
I can feel it. We've been through that with Stephen Morris and Chad Kelly and PJ Walker, and it happens at least once every 1 or 2 years. The Colts.
Chad Kelly was supposed to be the franchise savior. I mean, I remember seeing some of those takes, and I'm like, oh boy.
The amount of times I had to hear his name was unfortunate.
Yes. Yeah.
So
we'll transition to running backs now. I think far and away this is the best running back room. Yes, this is the best running back room in football. Bar none, in my opinion. I think they're better depth-wise than Cleveland. Jonathan Taylor coming off of monster rookie season, and it's still amazing to me that he only played 47% of the snaps last season and put up 1,200 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. He's your bell cow, plain and simple. He'll probably push maybe 250, 300 carries if they lean on the run like we think they will. But he's your guy. Obviously, we talked about Nyheim Hines earlier. He's your change of pace, your 3rd down back, your punt returner. And then after that, you've got Marlon Mack is back on a 1-year deal. I'm assuming he'll be ready for week 1. Would not shock me if he gets carries in week 1.
I think he's 100% right now, if I'm not mistaken. There's no limitations on him.
Good.
Yeah.
So he should be good to go preseason training or, preseason, regular season, week 1. And then running back 4 is kind of the question mark right now. I had Jordan Wilkins making the roster in my 53-man. I believe you did as well. I think Zach had Deion Jackson, so he differed there with us. That's the battle I'm watching. Like, we know the top three. It's pointless to even discuss it in a sense, but running back 4 is interesting because Jordan Wilkins held down a considerable role in the last few years as kind of that short yardage back. He went in place of Taylor when Taylor was hurt or fumbled. So he has a ton of experience. Deion Jackson, undrafted free agent out of Duke. He is kind of that cult hero right now within draft Twitter. People love him, love the traits, but you're not hearing much from him when it comes to the Colts. So where are you at in that running back 4 battle, and who do you think ultimately grabs that spot?
Yeah, I'm just giving it to the wily veteran and Wilkins. He does everything they need. He's good between the tackles and outside. He can catch the ball. He's a good pass protector. He's a very efficient runner. In his first year, I think as a rookie, he was number 1 in the NFL in yards per carry. And then second year was tied for second. Mm-hmm. And then between those 2 years, overall, he was number 1. So he was very efficient in those first couple years. I think if the Colts had a bigger need in the return game, that would give Deion Jackson more of an edge, but they don't. Like, they super don't have any need in the return game. So unless he blows the wheels off this thing, I don't expect him to win it. Kind of reminds me, I mean, now I'm going to give the guy a chance. We still have to see him in training camp, but kind of reminds me of a few years ago when the Colts signed Josh Ferguson as an undrafted free agent, and he got like the most guaranteed money of any undrafted guy. Yeah, he just wasn't very good. Like, he was known as kind of a playmaking, pass catching running back, but he just wasn't very good in the NFL. Yeah. That's a low bar for Jackson. I'm sure he'll probably be a little better, but I mean, Wilkins is an established guy. I've always liked Wilkins a lot. I thought he could be someone who could go and be someone's starter for a year or two until they found like a big time guy. He can get the job done. I mean, I think he could hit 1,000 yards if he was a starting running back all year. I don't think he'd get you like 1,500 yards, but
no, yeah,
he's always got the job done, and he's a 3-down back.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going. I think the only way Wilkins doesn't land the number 4 job is if Chris Ballard gets an offer he can't refuse in training camp or cut down day due to injuries.
Yeah, trading would make sense.
Right, and the one team that I keep coming back to, I think, is the New York Jets. You know, they have
that's the pipeline between those two. The Jets are the Colts East.
Yep, and they need a running back. I mean, I know obviously they drafted Michael Carter out of North Carolina, but it's a talent depleted offense.
I like LaMichael Pirine though, but I don't think he's the answer there. It'll probably be Pirine and Michael Carter. But yeah, I mean that would make sense. Wilkins in New York.
That's the only way I don't see him making the roster is he gets traded, and that would be a shame to see. But that also would mean that Ballard and Reich are so comfortable with Deion Jackson as that 4th running back that essentially it wouldn't matter. But man, I'd hate to see Wilkins go.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in what the running back position is going to look like this offseason, because we got to remember Tom Rathman is retired. Yep. And that was a guy that harped on ball security and pass blocking. I've watched those drills in training camp like every day of camp for the last, I think he's here 3 years. I'm interested to see what it's going to look like this year under, I think, Scotty Montgomery's the new running backs coach. Yeah. So it's something I just kind of thought of is what's practice going to look like for the running backs now.
The other few names I don't want to forget about, I think it's a little unfair, but Darius Jet Anderson is still on the roster, and then Benny LeMay. So those are 2 other names that could be battling for either running back 4, depending on what Ballard and Reich do, or one of the practice squad spots. Do you see anything from those 2 that intrigues you, or is it just their back half of the roster fodder at this point?
Well, I did like Jet Anderson coming out of TCU last year. But I mean, there's a reason he found his way onto the Colts. I forget where he was prior. But yeah, it's running backs have a way of coming out of nowhere and making a name for themselves. But
It's a very fungible
Um,
position in a sense.
Yeah. It's
He was in
yeah,
Dallas.
that's right. Yeah.
Yep, he was
And I
in
remember
Dallas.
TCU had the other kind of power back at the time,
Yep,
but
my personal favorite, Sewu
yeah,
Alanalua. So yeah,
yes, there we go. But no, I like Jed Anderson coming out. I thought he was a playmaker. He always seemed to find his way outside and picking up chunk runs. Um, I don't know. It's still very much Jordan Wilkins' spot to lose.
right.
Now, could he be better than Jackson and LeMay? Absolutely. I mean, could he fall fourth or fifth on the pecking order? Yeah, absolutely. We might see him quite a bit in the preseason. Actually, I hope we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd give him that edge over LeMay just because I remember liking him coming out of TCU.
Yeah, I mean, that was a backfield in college that had two legitimate NFL running backs that I thought, at least on tape, and neither has really caught on. Sewu Olanilua is in Dallas still, and he's listed as a fullback, which is stunning. But and then obviously Jed Anderson is here and just trying to get a chance. But yeah, loaded backfield. It says something about your depth when the only real question mark ahead of the season is who's running back for. So
Yeah,
Colts are in great shape there. I also think they're
okay.
Yes, very much so. Another position I think that they're set at, which kind of goes against this narrative that's been built this offseason, is wide receiver. Obviously, re-signing T.Y. Hilton, you retain Zach Pascal on a second-round tender. Michael Pittman Jr. entering his second year. Paris Campbell, as we talked about, is returning from injury. Obviously, big things ahead for him if he stays healthy. And then you've got just a bunch of guys that are solid and could be really good wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. You have Ashton Doolin is back. Desmond Patman has been working out with Carson Wentz all offseason. There's just it's a really solid group. The rookie Michael Strachan is an intriguing weapon. I mean, you can't teach the size and speed that he has. Obviously DeMichael Harris is back. JJ Nelson's battling for a spot. Like, this is, I don't want to say it's a deep group, but it's pretty solid. And I was remiss to not even mention undrafted free agent Tyler Vaughns, who was pretty solid at USC. I did an article late last week. Bleacher Report said that the biggest red flag for the Colts this offseason, or the biggest regret, was not adding to the receiver room. Basically saying that it wasn't a good group. It lacked a true one, and they weren't putting Carson Wentz in the best position possible to succeed. I completely disagree with that. I think it's a very good group on paper. They'd fit together very well. You've seen these guys live and in person more than I have. Where are you at with this receiver group entering the 2021 season?
Yeah, the Colts they're an offense that doesn't really need that top dog standout guy. They don't need
that
Jones
Julio
or
Jones.
DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah. They spread the ball around so much that they just don't need that guy. And they do a lot of short stuff. They do a lot of rhythmic yards after catch stuff. That's just not how their offense is. And I know you were kind of hesitant to say it, but I'll say it. I mean, they're kind of bizarrely deep. Sure, it's not like a powerful group, but down to the bottom, they got name recognition everywhere.
I really like it.
Yeah, Tariq Black was a notable draft prospect over the last year or two, elected to come back to college. Tyler Vaughn's productive since he was a freshman at USC. JJ Nelson, who people really liked already as a pro with the Cardinals back in the day. Gary Jennings, they've got guys really you recognize from top to bottom. They got a dozen guys you've seen before. Yeah. I mean, you would think all day JJ Nelson could make a team, and he's not going to. I love this young these guys competing for spot 5 and 6. Desmond Patman, Mike Strawn, DeMichael Harris, like you said, that's going to be a really exciting competition. DeMichael Harris was a nifty little gadget guy last year. They had a set kind of package of plays for him, and he performed that well. Strachan, like you said, big guy, fast guy, dominated his level of competition. Didn't play last year, so you didn't really see him take that next step, but the Colts seem to like what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just get excited about those guys, but have low expectations. I think they've got kind of high expectations for him. Patman, they've invested in him. They didn't have to carry him on the roster all last year, but they did. He was only active for one game. That to me, that speaks volumes that they kept a receiver, which is a non-essential position. They kept an extra guy around to be inactive all year. So they obviously like him. It's a very interesting group. We know the top 4 is locked in, but 5, I think they'll keep 6 just because of how deep the group is, but who's 5 and 6?
Right. Yeah, and that's, obviously they don't have a Julio Jones, a DeAndre Hopkins, that's fine. I think people were certainly down on T.Y. Hilton. He's no longer the true number 1 game breaker he once was, but that guy can still play. And I think
last time we saw him with Andrew Luck, he was.
Right. And
he's had 2 quarterbacks since then that don't really fit his style of play.
Exactly. And that's what I was getting to. Like, I think people were taking how he looked with Phillip Rivers last year and said, oh, this guy, he doesn't have it anymore. He's lost a step. No, it had more to do with the quarterback. Didn't really have the arm to consistently take advantage of T.Y. But, I mean, this receiver room, if everything clicks, can be pretty darn good. I mean, T.Y. can be your legitimate number 1. Zach Pascal's really good wherever you want to put him. Michael Pittman, for some reason people were down on him. Oh, he barely had 500 yards receiving last year. How is he, held in such high regard? You just have to watch the tape. He got open consistently. And Paris Campbell, I mean, we saw in week 1 against the Jaguars how good he could be in Frank Reich's system. He just has to stay healthy. But the one guy we didn't mention that's kind of battling for either wide receiver 6 or practice squad spot is Courtney Davis out of Texas A&M.
Yeah,
he had some of the best footwork I've seen in the 10 years I've been doing this coming out of Texas A&M. And I struggle to understand how he hasn't latched onto a roster. So when you have as many receivers as the Colts have with clear name recognition, NFL experience, and legitimate traits that stand out, all battling for 2 spots and then maybe two practice squad spots, that's pretty darn good. I think that the national media and, some of those talking heads are just overlooking this group, in my opinion, because it's on a run-first offense. There's nobody on that team last year had over 100 targets. So I feel that they're overlooked big time. So
they are.
Maybe
they're a young group that's still developing, really.
Right. The one question I had for you before we moved on from receiver, who do you think leads that group in targets in 2021? Obviously, it was T.Y. Hilton last year with 93. The next closest at receiver was Zach Pascal with 71. Do you see that pecking order changing this year? Do you see someone hitting 100 targets? Where are you at with this group?
I think it'll still be T.Y. Just until we see otherwise, because like I said a little earlier, there's been a couple times where we thought we'd see the passing of the guard, whether it was Paris Campbell 2 years ago or Pittman last year, and it always still winds up being T.Y. up at the top at targets. So I still kind of see that being the case, but then I see Pittman coming in next. He's started to get a lot of targets. There were several games peppered throughout the year where he had more targets than everyone else. In the wild card playoff loss last year, he led the Bills and the Colts. The Bills team with Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, he had more targets than anybody in the game with 10.
Yep. Had
5 catches for 90 yards out of it and a carry. So I think they're going to get Pittman quite a few targets. It's hard to say. If everyone's healthy, of course, it is kind of curious to think who is going to get that many out of T.Y., Campbell, Pittman. Pascal, I'm comfortable saying would be last. Pascal steps up in the absence of everyone else. He's the most reliable guy in that group, to be honest with you. He steps up whenever he's needed. But if we're putting health first, saying everyone's going to be healthy, then I say Ty, Pittman, and then Campbell narrowly third, because they just try to manufacture looks for him everywhere. We don't know what a 16 game schedule looks like for him, though. It's like they just get so excited to have him because he's never around that they just force feed him all these touches. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in lockstep with you. This is a really good group, regardless of them not having a true headliner at this point. And I think you don't need to have a receiving core that has a true headliner to compete. So we'll see how it plays out. But wide receiver 5 and 6 will definitely be an interesting battle. But as we move on to another position, tight end, we kind of know the three at this point. Jack Doyle, Mo Alley-Cox, Kylan Granson. They could keep a fourth tight end. I don't see that happening at all. I think, was it you or Zach that had Noah Togiai as the fourth tight end on the roster in your first prediction?
Let me see that again.
But I mean, regardless, while you look that up, I think
he had Togiai on his list, which it makes sense. When the Colts picked him up last year from the Eagles, someone I know who writes for the Eagles said they were kind of pissed that the Colts were able to swoop in and get him.
Yeah,
because he was a developmental guy with a lot of good athletic traits. But no, I think I only had the 3 tight ends. Because Jordan Thomas is up there too, because he's got NFL experience from Houston.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a lot of sense as well if they were going to have 4. But Togiai has more upside. Honestly, Farrad Green, he's got upside as well. They liked him a lot last spring and summer.
Yeah, and I think they keep 3. But man, if they want to go maybe 3 running backs, then open up that position. You can keep one of those experienced tight ends, but I just think that it's set in stone 3 at this point. And the question is, who's the number 1 tight end? Does it matter? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that it matters in this offense. But if you went just based off of hype this offseason, Mo Alley-Cox is the number 1 tight end. He's the next Antonio Gates. It's kind of funny to see, especially him coming off of a 31 catch season. But man, the guy's earned it. I mean, he had a really good year last year. He's developed as a blocker, as a route runner. I think in the end, he grabs the number 1 mantle as the tight end, just because Jack Doyle's kind of on the older side. But this is a really good group. I mean, where do you stand with this tight end group overall? And do you see Kylan Granson kind of taking over for one of these guys midway through the year?
I don't see Granson really starting to eat into the other guy's snaps until next year, just because tight end takes a while to develop.
Right.
I see this looking almost exactly like last year, but Granson plays the role of Trey Burton this year. I am interested to see how snaps get divvied up between Doyle and Alley-Cox, because they won't hesitate to pull either of those guys and make them a blocker either, just because they're both so good at blocking, but they'll also send them out. We've been saying for a couple years now we want to see Alley-Cox get a bigger role, and last year he did start to get that.
Yeah.
God, no, it's kind of like the TY thing. I'm going to have to see it before I believe they're going to replace Jack Doyle with someone else. Yeah. Because he can do a little bit of everything too. He finds a soft spot in the zones. He just moves the chains. He's a really good blocker. So I don't think they'll take him off the field. He just always seems to be the lead guy.
Who do you think gets more work in the red zone out of this group? Is it Mo Alley-Cox? Is it Kylan Granson? Or is it still kind of that Jack Doyle see it, or you need to see it to kind of change your mind?
They love Doyle and Alley-Cox in the red zone. So I mean, we saw Trey Burton in there a lot too. There was a couple game stretch where I think he had rushing touchdowns. I think they'll even use Granson like that too. They could give him some carries because he's just athletic and he's able to do multiple things like Burton was able to.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's no reason to take away Doyle and Allie Cox's red zone looks, because especially Doyle, he man, he'll shrink his window, but he can find those soft spots
Yeah.
and sit right down at the goal line, and he might be their best inside the 5, inside the 10-yard line pass catcher.
He's super underrated as a route runner in that area too. I mean, I remember, kind of breaking down the Colts Steelers tape from last year, it was 2 years ago when Hoyer came in for
the play up the seam.
Yeah, and I mean, he cooked Devin Bush, who's one of the more athletic linebackers in the league. Like he is an underrated route runner in between the 20s.
He knows what he's doing.
He really does. He has a great feel for it, and that's why it's kind of like, oh, they need to upgrade to Zach Ertz, or they need to really address tight end. It's like, no, they have really a guy. He's slept on in a sense. So
he's just not like super athletic. It just looks like your dad out there playing tight end, but like Dad's still got some moves. Yeah, he gets open and he moves the chains. Like he does exactly what they need him to do, and he's a really good blocker.
Yeah, I like to say he's a bit of a technician. Like he is very to the point on his routes. He hits his spots. He doesn't give anything away in his route running to kind of telegraph what he's doing. He's so solid. He's so solid. And I see a little bit of Dallas Clark in him, honestly. I mean, I know that might be a little bit of a reach, but because Dallas Clark was a much better athlete, but just in the way that they get open is very similar, in my opinion.
Understanding where they need to be, finding those spots in the zone and how they run routes, that is similar.
Yeah.
It's like if you mix Jack Doyle's technical abilities, his mechanics, with Kylan Granson's athleticism, then you have Dallas Clark.
Absolutely. What about Granson this year? I mean, do we expect him to kind of burst onto the scene? I know tight end is traditionally a very difficult transition from college to the NFL. But the way that the Colts are talking him up, and the way that, Reich has been on record kind of envisioning how he's going to use him, could we see Granson make an impact right away?
Maybe a small impact. I think they'll have a specific plan for him, but I just don't see it. And there's so many mouths to feed. He's just so low on the pecking order. I mean, I see like 25 targets or so. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. It doesn't seem like a lot, but I mean, we've seen that with, Mo Alley-Cox in the past, and Trey Burton, and those guys just don't get a ton of targets. I think he'll make some plays this year. He'll probably have a couple chunk plays, might have 1 or 2 touchdowns, but I don't think he's going to be a huge part of the offense yet. I think that's their future outlook for him, but I don't see it this year.
Do you think that those targets, you're saying about 25, do you think those come more in between the 20s or inside the 20, where they kind of use that size and athleticism to be a mismatch?
Yeah, I think with him it'll be in between the 20s, just because
he'll be able to stretch that seam.
He can be a mismatch, and you want to get him out in space, and there's just no space inside the red zone. So I think it makes a lot of sense to get him out there, get him in the open field and see what he can do. They may do a couple things with him in the red zone if they think he can run the Wildcat or do some option stuff, maybe, because they did that with Burton. Burton had a quarterback background, so that kind of fit in well with him. You obviously saw him do that in Philadelphia, but they'll take athletic guys and do multiple things with them. And so we might see them do some fun stuff with Granson, at least in training camp. I think his work primarily will be inside the 20s, 20 to 20, not red zone necessarily.
Yeah, I got you. Where are you at as a blocker with Granson? Where are you at with his blocking? Do you think that's something he could do if need be, or is that something that this should be his redshirt year in a sense from a blocking standpoint?
Yeah, if need be. I don't think he's really that bad at blocking, but you're not going to put him up there with Mo Alley-Cox and Jack Doyle either. in terms of his blocking, he's going to be more Trey Burton than he was Eric Ebron, and Eric Ebron couldn't block anything.
Right.
But Trey Burton had been adequate at times throughout his career as a blocker. I think that's what Granson is. That's not why you have him anyways. I mean, you can get by with him with his level, and I'm sure he'll get better. Like Clayton Adams was an offensive line coach, so he'll work with him a bit as a blocker. He'll get better, but that's not what you have him around for. Yeah.
Yeah, he has to be passable there. He can't be a guy that has to come off the field when they want to go 2 tight ends because he can't survive out there. So just be passable and get in the way. Just don't be an Ebron.
Yeah.
In a sense. So final position we're going to look at tonight offensively is just the offensive line in general. And it feels like it's been talked about ad nauseum all offseason. We know the 4 starters from guard to right tackle. That's been set in stone for a while. But left tackle will be likely Sam Tevi. I think that's pretty safe to say at the moment as Eric Fisher recovers from a torn Achilles suffered in the AFC Championship game back in January. But the way I'm looking at it right now, left to right will be Sam Tevi, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Mark Lewinsky, and Braden Smith. I think you're in lockstep there as well.
Yeah, there's no reason to think otherwise.
Right. And then I mean, it all depends on how training camp starts for Fisher, but I kind of suspect he's going to be on, reserve PUP to start the year, which means that, he'd be out the first 6 weeks of the season at minimum. And then I think the 5th week is when that clock will start where they have to start practicing him. And then I think they have until week 8 to make a roster move with him. But just how do you feel about Tevi starting at left tackle? Is it that big of a red flag with this group, or do you think Tevi can be serviceable for the first month or 2?
Yeah, I think he can get by. I mean, you don't want him starting all year, but there's ways you can get around it. You can have a quick passing game. You can throw a tight end over there. It just so happens you have 2 tight ends who you'd be comfortable acting as an extra blocker. Danny Penner was an extra blocker a lot of last year too. You can get by. I mean,
Zach Hicks has done a piece on that for us recently, where you can kind of hide a left tackle in a sense and just give him help. So
there's a lot you can do. And there's some sneaky things you can do too. Like if he is getting pushed back, and then you have Nyheim Hines back there. You're in shotgun. You have Nyheim next to you. Just leak him out as that pressure starts to come off the left side. Sneak him out there. That's again something sneaky you can do that'll generate big plays. But I don't think Tevi's going to have some big long leash either, because I do think they like Will Holden. I don't know what to expect from Julian Davenport. I mean, maybe he's more the backup right tackle. Than would be left. If I had to guess, as the season starts, it'll probably be Tevi and Will Holden, and then Braden Smith and Julian Davenport. And that's if Davenport makes the roster.
Yeah. How many linemen do you have them keeping?
I think I had 9 initially.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I have the starters we mentioned, and then with Eric Fisher on reserve PUP.
I feel like I had 9.
Yeah. I have 9 because I have Chris Reed.
It's interesting though, because you got some young guys that are interesting to keep around. I love Will Fries.
Yep.
I think Chris Reed sticks. I think I made a couple tough cuts with Joey Hunt and Jake Camp and Julian Davenport, but I think I had 9.
Yeah, I believe I cut. Did I cut Pinter? No, I kept Pinter. So.
I Pinter and Fries, so I got rid of Joey Hunt and Eldrin Camp and Julian Davenport.
Yep. Yeah. I think Holden and Pinter can kind of be those swing tackles. I think Will Fries can be as well. I mean, he can back up every position on the offensive line, and then Chris Reed can play both guards and center. So I think you're really set with this group. And then the question becomes, who leaves that group when Fisher's healthy? I can't imagine it would be Sam Tevi, honestly. but who knows, depending on how he looks, I would hate to see a guy like Will Fries get cut and then hopefully you can sneak him onto the practice squad. But
it could come at another position. You got I think
true.
we both think probably 6 receivers,
yep.
5 safeties could be a lot. May the best Sean Davis win by that point. Defensive line I think is a position they want to keep beefed up, but I could see a wide receiver or safety being being on the chopping block at that point.
Yeah. Are you confident in this offensive line right now? Obviously, there's a question mark at left tackle. I mean, that's fair to say at this point. But are you confident overall in this offensive line's ability to establish a power running game and protect Carson Wentz at a better level than he had in Philadelphia?
Yeah, by year's end, I'll be pretty confident once Fisher's there. And I'm confident in this coaching staff's ability to know that they don't have an ideal left tackle until Fisher gets there. They know that, and so they'll formulate ways to get around it. Mm-hmm. Like when Andrew Luck came back in 2018, they did a lot of short stuff. Honestly, their offensive line was real shaky early in 2018. I think they didn't get it figured out until week 5. The pieces kind of fell into place week 5, week 6. But they'll do a lot of quick, short stuff to counter that. As for the run game, luckily they have Quentin Nelson right there next to Sam Tevy, so that'll help.
Yeah,
they'll figure out ways to get the run game going. They'll get it. It may not always be pretty, but play strength isn't Tevy's big thing. But maybe they rely on more dives in between Nelson and Kelly than they do in between Nelson and Tevy. I don't know.
Yeah.
They can have also so much time. If they haven't already identified that's the weak link on their offensive line, then I don't know what to tell them. Like they have so much time to figure this out and to know what they want to do until Eric Fisher gets out there.
Yeah, and the big thing is like they don't have to run to the left side to utilize Nelson. You can pull him and get him on the move. I mean, that clip, I think it was against the Lions where everyone thought he was actually screaming while pulling, but it was doctored video. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
you can get that guy on the move and let him just hunt linebackers and corners on the boundary and still be able to run behind him. But what you said earlier, trusting this coaching staff to be able to scheme ways to win, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they know Sam Tevy's the weak link on this offensive line, and they know that Quentin Nelson is the guy in the league at left guard. They know that their bread and butter is to run the football. So they're going to figure it out no matter what. And then we'll see what this offense truly is when Eric Fisher comes back from this Achilles injury. But Jake, the one question I had for you to wrap up the night, last season, according to Pro Football Reference, the Indianapolis Colts offense was 9th in the league overall, just in total offense. Shockingly, they had 26 turnovers in this chart, which was the most of any in the top 10. That's stunning. But do you think that this group overall, with some of the moving parts that they've had this offseason, do you think they can improve, or should we expect a slight step back from that number 9 overall ranking?
No, I think that's a safe bar to shoot for. It's all about yardage there in terms of those rankings typically. I think they can do that. I mean, they've got a quarterback with a bigger arm than Phillip Rivers. Wentz isn't going to be as efficient as Rivers was, but he's got a much bigger arm, which will result in bigger plays. He can run so much better. He can defend himself and get out of some pressure.
Yeah.
Their run game should be better. You're adding Marlon Mack to it. I don't want to say they're gonna be like top 5 or anything, but like saying 9, just barely in there in the top 10. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much where I'm at. I mean, right in that 7 to 9 range.
I will say I think they're going to have a top 5 rushing attack.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
if they have any sort of reasonable passing game, I think that by default will make them a top 10 offense.
Yeah, last year they were where's passing offense? Last year they were 11th in passing and they were 11th in rushing. So rushing is going to take a significant jump forward just in Jonathan Taylor's second year. I think top 3 is what they should be shooting for, honestly. And then, yeah, if that passing offense can just be middle of the road, between 10 and 15, I don't see why this offense couldn't be knocking on top 5, but I'm not going to go there just yet until we truly see what it looks like on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm just hoping for some more big plays in the passing game, and I think that will be the case.
I want more chunk plays.
Yeah, you still got some receivers here who play well with a style like Wentz and Andrew Luck. And I don't want to compare Carson Wentz and Andrew Luck as overall quarterbacks, but they do have that similar style where they can keep plays alive and look downfield and find that guy late. Like that's one thing that made Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton so good together. Yep. And I do expect to see T.Y. Hilton's big play meter go up a little bit this year because of that style. That's just what he's been comfortable with at the quarterback position in the NFL. And you can see when he's been neutered by quarterbacks who just don't do much downfield, that you can just see it. He's had some really dark times in his career, having to play with Scott Tolzien, Jacoby Brissett. Phillip Rivers was I think Phillip Rivers gave them very good quarterback play, but just isn't the best fit with a guy like T.Y.
Right.
But T.Y. is getting a guy now who fits him pretty well.
Well, that is going to do it for the Horseshoe Guys for this week. Next week, Jake will be back, but we'll be joined by Zach Hicks. Those two previously had the Believe in Colts podcast. Now they're going to do this one. Zach's going to fill in for me as I move back across the country. So wish me luck on that. But I will return on Thursday with either Zach Hicks or Andrew Moore, an intern with Sports Illustrated. We'll just kind of break down the latest news and preview some positions again. So for Jake, I'm Josh. That will do it for the Horseshoe Guys here on this Monday night. Have a good one, everyone.